so many new pieces to this IU football team.
To me, that's going to set the tone on how you get ready for games on Saturday in the fall.
I would put that Indiana room up against anybody else in the conference, and that's something that we typically don't even come close to saying.
If you want to get total sickos committee about it, there's a position battle at long snapper too.
This is the Hoosier Huddle Podcast, part of the College Huddle Podcast Network.
Good evening and welcome to the Hoosier Huddle Podcast. I'm Sammy Jacobs. Along with me are special guests Ricky Tamis and Wracher from the Rock Report, a new podcast featuring former IU players. So welcome in, guys. We're going to have a great show previewing the Northwestern game, getting into that matchup closely, and then getting into kind of what's happening in college football with the transfer portal, NIL, what are big pictures, what's coming down the road, and we'll have, the athlete side of it too. A lot of finger pointing going on, but there's only one finger that needs to be pointed. That's probably to the NCAA. So welcome in, guys. Sean, how are you doing? And then you guys could introduce the Rock Report.
Good, yeah. Thank you for having us. So, just a little overview of the Rock Report real quick. We, decided to start a podcast kind of from a different perspective than what fans see. Obviously being around the program the past 5 years with me and, four before that with Ricky, we've got a lot of different perspectives and we got a lot of ins with this program. So a lot of times, we hear things a little differently from what's going around on the Twitter sphere and the all the message boards. So, we're just kind of here to talk about stuff and interview some players and have fun while we're doing it.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Thank you for having us on. But yeah, no, that first game, FIU, Sean and I were watching and kind of on FaceTime almost the whole game. And then we kind of got bored and we had this idea, let's make a Twitter account, start posting. We post those like Boomer Doom winners and losers of the first few games on our normal accounts. And then we just decided to run with it, make a podcast, make a Twitter account. So now we're here.
Awesome. That's very much like the origin story of Hoosier Huddle, where I was sitting around in my apartment going, hey, you know what? Indiana football needs a new source of news. So awesome that you guys are doing it. I'm sorry it won't be a James Evans Ray Guy Award campaign show since he's only punted like 9 times, which is ridiculous. But yeah, let's get into Northwestern, and Ben has joined us as well. IU heads up to Northwestern at 5-0, ranked 23rd in the country, 2-0 in the Big Ten. Northwestern, they're playing on the lake in the temporary stadium, which, Sean, we'll talk about later in the show on how that affects, special teams, kicks, snaps, and all that stuff. And Northwestern's 2-2, 0-1 in the Big Ten, but a big game. You can watch on Big Ten Network at 3:30 and listen to it on the Indiana Radio Network as well. So, Ben, we'll bring you in here. What are your first thoughts on the trip up to Northwestern?
Yeah, I think IU's got a great opportunity to go in there. This is a team still figuring out its identity on offense. Northwestern's switched quarterbacks now. Looks like Cam Porter, their star running back, is going to be out for this game. Looks like they're hopeful to get him back soon, but probably not in time for the IU game. And I think this is a great opportunity for an IU team which had some struggles on offense with the turnovers last week to go back, really respond, get a dominant win, and move ahead for the Nebraska game.
Yeah, big matchup. Northwestern's always kind of a tricky place to play. Indiana hasn't won up there since 1993. I know it's not Ryan Field, and it's not on cat time, which is nice. It always felt like it was kind of a sleepy atmosphere. Sean, when you're looking at this game, what are you looking for?
Yeah, I think right off the bat, Northwestern doesn't come off as, the most talented team. I think they've got flashes of hope in guys like AJ Henning. There's a couple guys in their defense that are pretty solid. I really think this is a game where you've got to see the Hoosiers take advantage on the edges and then establish the run game real early, especially with this wind. I don't love the setup of the stadium. I really think we can dominate with the run, and this is not a team that's really going to punch you back in the face after.
You talk about the wind, and it looks like it's going to come off the lake, going southeast and a crosswind. Just can you describe how difficult it is to play in that, not only as a snapper and a kicker, but also throwing the ball?
Yeah, I think especially, from my standpoint, it's always special teams is going to be, the first thing I talk about. But a lot of times just schematically, you've got another factor you've got to throw in there. And especially from a special team standpoint, directionally, it really doesn't help, only being able to go one way because it's, easy to read. And then say if we're, on the left hash, you can't punt left into the boundary. You've got to punt to the field, which can set up big returns. From an offensive standpoint, I just think it takes away a little bit of what we've seen with Curtis Rourke, where, teams have to play that deep shot. So it kind of takes away one play they have to get rid of, and a lot of times you'll see teams, come from maybe a cover three, maybe down to a one, possibly a two, stack up the box a little bit more and play the run game.
All right, switching to the offensive line and offensive side of the ball, establishing that run game. Ricky, what does IU need to do against a very stout Northwestern defense to be successful?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of pretty stout rushing defense, especially for Northwestern, top 15 in the country. I think they're giving up only 92 yards a game. And kind of on the contrary, that Indiana running back stable, kind of four different running backs out there, and led by that offensive line with Mike Kadick, they're averaging 210 yards on the ground. Just going to be kind of north and south, right up the middle, looking for that. Not going to be too many trickerations, kind of misdirection runs, but I really think they're going to get after it kind of right up the middle of that defense.
So, IU has struggled in the run game for a couple years now, and then, averaging over 200 yards a game this year. Is it purely a talent standpoint at running back, or is there something schematically that they're doing? And you see guys like tight end Zach Horton, you saw Elijah Surratt go up and block guys in the middle. Is there something that different that they're doing, or is this just they've got some more talent and some better backs in the backfield too?
Yeah, I don't really think that it's because of better backs in the backfield. We've kind of always had a great stable of running backs, starting with Stevie Scott when he was at Indiana. But it's kind of second year under Bob Bostad, and you can really tell this offensive line. And I don't believe it's much more talented than it was in years past, but you can kind of tell with Kadick being the fronts and how they communicate on offensive line. They're schematically up front, kind of a lot of duo, a lot of double teams. It's really helping the run game.
Now, is helmet communication helping that too with the technology on the sideline? Is it making it easier to read than those giant poster boards?
Well, like for the offensive line, in years past, we never looked at the side. The quarterback handled all that, and they kind of gave us one word, and that identified what our run play was. And then from there, the center will ID the front, kind of call the mic, and everyone will kind of communicate. But I do think just having that year two under Bostad, all those kind of that communication's much more fluent this year.
Sean, we'll go to you. It's special teams in a game like this, especially when there's a big underdog. You talked about big returns with the wind and things like that. What do you see out of Indiana special teams who've been pretty good this year? Um, to they need to do to win this game?
Yeah, I think Northwestern's a team that is generally known for having pretty solid special teams. I think Grant Kane's done a pretty good job so far of being a little bit more decisive than we've been in the past, especially in the return game. Like last week watching, obviously, you had a block late, but just, showing pressures, backing guys off, showing pressure, holding up, showing hold up, and then pressuring, just different things he's been mixing in that I think has helped a ton be able to establish pretty decent returns, especially on punt return, sorry. And on the contrary, the kicking game, Radicic has been incredible so far. I think Evans has struggled a little bit, but I really think schematically, Kane has kind of set up that punt team to where, Jimmy can have a not so great game and they're still going to do well just because the coverage is so good. And then the 20 and in balls, the way he's doing those now is a lot different from the past, and it's gonna, I think pay a lot at the end of the season when you're playing in the cold.
Can you talk about how far James Evans has come from his freshman year when he was like running on the field with no helmet on to now being like one of the better punters in the Big Ten?
Yeah, I think he was a guy that the way his program worked from that Pro Kick Australia program is you don't really recruit those guys. It's more of you use them, they're almost like a consultant, and they send you who they think will fit your program. You might have one or two guys you pick from, but you're not looking at their whole pool. So he was a guy they sent us just because of his similarities in pocket punts to Hayden Whitehead. But he came and he was very raw. Powerful leg, but with the rush, with everything else, just wasn't comfortable. And I think it's why you saw some struggles early on. But I mean, he really took off last year, and coming into this year, I think it's something fans probably don't see and notice off the bat. But if you look, the next time they're, I would say inside the 50, if you watch the rotation of the ball as it hits the ground, he's hitting the ball so it spins sideways, so that there's no forward roll when the ball lands. So like that's one of those things that field position wise, there might be 5, 10 guys in the country that are able to do that consistently. Like, it's pretty incredible some of the things he's able to do.
Yeah, it's punting has become more of an art form here in the last 10 or 15 years than it has been. Let's move on to excuse me, matchups to watch. And we'll start with Ben. We like to do this, pick either a player against player. You wrote our matchup to watch this week. What's your matchup to watch?
Yeah, so I went a little out of the box this week. Initially, it was going to be Cam Porter, like we said, with him sitting out this game. I went to sort of schematically the sidelines. I think this is really going to come down to Shanahan on offense versus Northwestern's defense. And one of the things Sean touched on really early is I think this is going to come down to establishing the run early and often. Northwestern plays with a very light box, but they've been able to get pressure. They've had, I think, 8 different guys now get home on a quarterback. And I think that establishing that run and allowing those safeties to creep down, sort of forcing them to commit to the run, will open up all of these possibilities for IU and these talented wide receivers we have to just, sort of take over this game.
Yeah, it's been Big Ten football for the last 150 years. Run the ball, stop the run. It's been college football for the last 150 years. Ricky, we'll go to you. What matchup, when you sit down and watch this game, are you keeping an eye on?
Yeah, I'm gonna obviously watch the trenches. That's what I like to watch. Gonna O-line, D-line. Especially that running game. Northwestern, they didn't make a big splash in the portal on the defensive line, but they are returning all their starters. Kind of excited to look in that more in that inside with Najee Story and Carmen Bastone, kind of against Mike Kadick, Drew Evans, and Bray Lynch.
Awesome. And then Sean, what's your matchup when you sit down and watch this game that you're looking at?
Yeah, I think a big one this week will be Aiden Fisher versus the Northwestern O-line. I think just holistically, you look at what they've been talking about in their press conference, kind of what they're trying to establish and where they think they're going to turn the page this week. It's really that O-line kind of dominating the run, being able to hold up in the pass game. And I think this is one of those games you're going to see Fisher likely fly around all over the field. I think their O-line's been shaky the past couple years. They've added a couple transfers, but I really think this is a game he'll dominate.
Aiden Fisher has been terrific, leading the Hoosiers in tackles. Also has drawn comparisons to Micah McFadden out there as well. My matchup to watch is going to be the Indiana defensive line against Jack Lausch, the young, inexperienced quarterback at Northwestern, who's making, I think, his third career start. Can they pressure him and make him make decisions quickly? We saw that with Billy Edwards last week, where IU put him on the ground, at least a dozen times. And the IU edge guys, Michael Kamara, Linnell Carr, all those guys have gotten into the backfield. CJ West had a couple knockdowns and a sack. And then, like you said, Sean, Aiden Fisher could get into the backfield. And Jalen Walker, I don't want to forget about him because he's just an athletic freak who goes around and makes plays. Let's get into keys to an IU win. We'll start with Sean and then go Ricky and Ben. Sean, if Indiana has to do one thing to win this game on Saturday, what is it?
Yeah, I think it's keep the specialists off the field. I think this offense has got to keep rolling the way they have been. Big Ten play, you can't, take a series off. You can't have a bad series because, that's when games start to just snowball or affect on you. And, I really think if Shanahan can keep, calling plays the way he is, I think you take that one quarter out of Curtis Rourke's year so far. I think this IU team dominates this game.
Ricky?
Yeah, and we talk about kind of turnovers last game, but I think the key this game is takeaways. The defense has done a really good job of keeping everything in front of them, but they haven't really forced many takeaways, and I'm kind of excited to see kind of more of aggressive defense this week.
Ben?
Yeah, I think it's time of possession. I think just keeping a long, extended drives going. We talked about establishing the run. I feel like doing that. I don't think this Northwestern team can really score quickly and in a hurry. And so I think if we can establish that run, get those long drives going, and most importantly, convert in the end, get points on the board, I think that's the key.
Yeah, my key to the game is getting don't leave points on the field. IU is scoring touchdowns at an 83% clip in the red zone. They've scored 90% of the time of their trips in the red zone. Score those 7 points. The easiest way to keep an underdog in the game is to settle for field goals, especially against a good defense. But IU has been really, really good at punching it in the red zone. So getting touchdowns instead of field goals. I'm sorry, Nico. I really want to see him kick a long field goal. But you know what? I'd like him to set the extra points record too at IU. Let's get into predictions. Ben, we'll start with you. What is your prediction for Saturday?
It's a tough one because I don't want to come off as crazy. I think this team can score, and I think it's going to be somewhere in the ballpark of 42-14.
Ricky?
Yeah, so whenever you talk about top offenses, you're always going to talk about an offense that scores over 35 points a game. So I'm going to go 38-17 Hoosiers.
All right. And Sean?
Yeah, I'm thinking more 48-21. I really think this is a game where we're probably going to take off late and, add some on top.
Kind of like the Charlotte game a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, even last week, just a little breakaway at the end, I think helps a lot.
Yeah, they've done that. I think they've outscored opponents. Going into last week, it was like 63-3 in the fourth quarter, and stuff like that. My prediction, as always, it's the team that scores the most points is going to win. But I think IU pulls away. I see this one being like a 34-13 game. They'll slow it down. They'll run the ball, but still be efficient on offense, kind of like what they did against FIU. But they punch the ball into the end zone. It just depends on how. Don't know if IU is going to get enough possessions to score 6 or 7 touchdowns, since the game is trending that way. But some other news in IU football land, and one of the hot topics around college football, it is not only an Indiana problem, is you've seen now with teams playing their 4th and 5th games, guys opting out. If people don't know the redshirt rule, you could play in up to 4 games and still keep your year of eligibility. This week saw Indiana lose Donovan McCulley to the transfer portal to keep that year of eligibility. And I wanted to get Sean and Ricky's take on it, because a lot of people are pointing their fingers at the athletes. A lot of people are pointing their fingers at NIL and things like that in the NCAA. I just want to say I'm not pointing my finger at anybody. The whole thing seems like a giant mess that we all saw coming 20 years ago, but nobody wanted to admit it, and all that way. And I do think changes are coming, probably for the better in the next year, whether that's giving guys just 5 years to play with no red shirt, revenue sharing, and things like that. But it is the wild, wild west out there. Sean, I'll start with you. What is going on with the transfer portal and guys opting out in the middle of the season?
Yeah, I'll start off with word from inside the program is the 5-year rule is pretty much set in stone that it's coming. I would say from the McCulley situation, from his standpoint, I understand it. It's by no means an NIL-driven decision. It's by no means a NCAA thing. It's really if I haven't used my red shirt and the NCAA is going to give me 4 games, you kind of had to know this was coming. McCulley's situation, for instance, if I've only gotten 2 receptions and, I'm a guy that before the year was a UDFA pre-draft grade. If I drop from there, I mean, I've got no shot. So I really think he's probably not going to be the last guy that does it. I think this game's going to kind of be, if a guy doesn't play at all, we might see some more next week. But really, I think it's inevitable just with the way the NCAA is set up right now. And I don't think it's an Indiana issue or, a Hoosiers Connect issue or anything like that.
No, it's happened all around the country, and I've always been told NFL scouts will find you wherever. You could play at some small college in North Dakota, but the one place they can't find you is on the bench. And so that seems to be the issue with a lot of these guys. Uh, Ricky, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is nowadays, you have 5 years to make the most money. It's not 5 years to play those 4 years in redshirt, but it's kind of in like the McCulley situation, many of the situations you're going to see around the country is these guys are on their last year of eligibility, not doing what they want. They're going to hop in the portal. It's not that they want to make more money somewhere else, but they have a chance to play another year, which is huge for these players. I mean, McCulley was playing at a touchdown last game, but in his instance, it does no good for himself to kind of just continue being on the Indiana football team in his role, even though it's an extremely important role. Uh, but it gives him a chance kind of next year to hop in the portal, go somewhere else. Another big thing with kind of the NIL and the kind of grand scheme of it, there's not much control that the coaches have on it, that the players have on it. It's kind of and the NCAA is never going to have control of it. I don't think there's something that they can do, but as long as it's kind of this is the landscape, we're going to be seeing it kind of all around college football.
There's been a lot of talk about revenue sharing. I think it's coming next year. With that, you saw the situation with the UNLV quarterback who said he was promised this, didn't get it in writing, and said he got that. Are athletes looking to get some sort of collective bargaining, sign contracts, not necessarily become employees, but have that enforceable, hey, you promised me X amount of money to come and play. I have it in writing. What are we going to do about it?
Yeah, I'll take this one first and then pass on to Rick. I think the real issue here is that NIL has become everything but NIL.
Right.
These like collective bargaining attempts that, we're trying to get revenue share and XYZ. A lot of this push is from teams and sports that really don't know what they're doing, but they've seen this whole NIL thing. And especially in Indiana, from our standpoint, you see a lot of kind of I would call them just what they are, the non-revenue sports. You see push from them and complaints that they're not getting enough NIL opportunities. And the more I thought about it, I'm like, okay, there might be 2 or 3 people at this school that legitimately could make money from their name, image, and likeness. And when we were there, it was probably Trace, Sidney Parrish, and maybe one guy on the football team, give or take, at a different, whenever you are in the season. What it's become instead is just a pile of money that, boosters can throw into. And I think what happens is we go to a revenue share model. This gap between, take the Notre Dame NIU game, right? Those games don't happen anymore. The talent gap is going to become massive because why would I ever go to a small school and get playing time if all these other schools are making, tenfold in revenue share money? I don't think the numbers are going to even out. And I think you're going to see the Big Ten and SEC just take off away from everybody else.
Yeah, NIL was supposed to be like, Curtis O'Rourke's nickname is the Maple Missile. And he's having a great year. It would be like if whatever local maple syrup company or whatever his hometown maple syrup is in Canada, because I'm sure there's a lot of them, we're like, hey, we're going to do a Curtis O'Rourke special Maple Missile, pancake deal or waffle deal, and stuff like that. That's always what I thought NIL was supposed to be. Obviously, it went off off the rails. Ben, do you have any questions or anything to add to this?
Yeah,
Especially from the legal side.
yeah, from the legal side, there's a couple of things I'll add. First, just touching on the Curtis Rourke thing, that's another interesting issue is the non-citizen student athletes. A lot of them are not eligible for and name, image, and likeness payments because they're on student visas or what's known as a special talent visa. So we see this not so much in the revenue generating sports, but in other sports too, where a person might make it to the Olympics where they're not eligible to profit off their name, image, and likeness in the United States. Going off of that with collective bargaining, that's a tough thing. We're playing Northwestern this week. Northwestern famously tried to unionize. It's an interesting situation because Northwestern's one of the only schools that can unionize. Only private universities that don't receive federal funding and are not religious-based institutions can unionize. So that's why you see schools like Northwestern and Dartmouth looking to unionize as student athletes, but not schools, say Notre Dame here in Indiana, who is private but is a religious university, cannot, by definition, unionize as employees. And so that's another wrinkle that we see a lot of this happening. I think ultimately what's going to have to happen is federal legislation. I think what's going on with the UNLV quarterback, that's sort of its own situation because he actually could get the money from them under this theory called promissory estoppel, which is he was promised this, he came to the school, and to his detriment did not receive that. It would be up to a court to decide, but he could end up getting the money he was promised under that theory of damages. So ultimately, I think that's going to push the needle towards federal legislation. Congress is super slow to act on this, as they have been. All of this stuff's been coming from court cases, but as more court cases get decided, I think more pressure gets put on Congress. You see someone like Saban coming out on College Game Day and seeing we need federal legislation on this. And the more pressure that comes from that, I think ultimately that's going to be the end solution. Because as you said, right now it really is the Wild West out there.
Sean, you look like you have some thoughts on that. Did you want to follow up?
So here's the issue. The issue is there's nobody enforcing these rules, right? So you take, let's just say Curtis Rourke and James Evans, right? They're by no means suffering from any of these rules. Like Curtis Rourke was able to just go to Canada and hold a high school football camp and get paid. To me, that doesn't make any sense at all, because if I have a student visa in the United States, right, and I go and do work for a company in the United States, I can't fly back home and get wired compensation for what I did here. So this whole thing, I think, is going to screw over the international players when we go to a revenue share, because then at that point, it's not just a revenue share. Now you have to be an employee of the university in order to get paid. So you look at teams that have recruited pretty heavily internationally. I think it's going to fall apart pretty quickly. You look at when Rourke was at OU, they had, I want to say, 3 or 4 guys from Canada. That's not going to happen anymore, because why would you?
Yeah, the whole thing seems to kind of be a mess where it was, you knew it was coming, you knew it was happening, and it seemed like the people in charge stuck their head in the sand and were in denial and hid behind this. We want it to be amateurism, and basically said that's somebody else's problem. And look, we're all professionals and workplaces. Whenever you say it's somebody else's problem, it never ever gets solved. So let's end it here. Let's do final thoughts on the Northwestern game. Thank you guys for coming on. Sean, we'll start with you. What are your final thoughts on Saturday's game?
Yeah, first off, I just want to thank you guys for having us. This is going to be huge for us just starting off, and you guys have been, loyal to the program and loyal to us since we, hit it off, I guess now, 6 years ago when we started playing. But back to the Northwestern game, I really see IU dominating this one. Early bowl eligibility, I think this is going to help us start to get into some of the conversations we need to be. I think from a college football playoff standpoint, our resume building starts likely after this game, starting to play some of the better teams. And I really look to see the staff use this game to just polish up a little bit more, just so we can go into the second half of the season. And there's no doubt that this team, deserves to be in a New Year's Six or a playoff game or whatever the situation ends up being. I don't want one of these, situations like we had in the past where we're going to the Outback Bowl instead of the Fiesta Bowl. I think this is a very, very good opportunity for IU to turn the page.
Yeah, Ricky.
I think this is really exciting times for Indiana football players, Indiana football fans, kind of everyone around the program. I mean, it's the first time they're going to go 6-0 since John Pont took that team in '68 to the Rose Bowl. And shout out Coach Pont, he was on the staff for a little. He's over at Oberlin now. But it's just exciting times. Really excited for especially the players who have been there for a while, kind of those 6-year players, Josh Sanguinetti, um, Mike Kadick. Those guys have been through a lot of ups and downs. And to go 6-0 and be bowl eligible on October, let's see, 5th is the game. I believe that's the earliest ever in Indiana football history. That year in '68 was October 28th. So it's just kind of really cool to see early October bowl eligibility on the line. Just really happy for the Hoosiers.
You guys both played on teams that in 2019 got bowl eligibility early. Does that put you at ease in terms of taking a little bit of pressure off? Is there a danger of getting bowl eligibility too early and taking the edge off? Or is it, hey, it seems like under Kirk Cignetti, it's, hey, we checked the box. Congratulations. On to the next thing.
I would say it turns the pressure up a bit. I think going to a bad bowl game is likely worse than being home for Christmas. So you got a little incentive to turn it up, get to a big bowl game and really just set up an incredible year, but set up the following year. And you're able to get more guys, into games, show these guys what a bowl experience is like. And from there, like that 2019 to 2020 transition, you know what you're chasing. It's a lot more fun to play football when you've got opportunities like this.
Yeah, and it's a lot more fun to be a fan as well. He saw it unfortunately, they couldn't see it in 2020. He saw it in the first few games of 2021, and then you saw it on Saturday against Maryland, where you had a solid crowd come out and be loud. So, yeah, it's more fun and more fun to cover, too. You could ask more questions and, get into stuff. So, Ben, final thoughts on the game on Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, you just touched on mine right there. I think obviously getting bowl eligibility this early is huge, and I hope that translates into a larger crowd. We can pack the rock like we see behind Sean and Ricky in their pictures there. When I came here for law school, the most wins I've ever seen in a season are 4. And so this season already has been something I've just been enjoying, just getting to be on the field for that the final couple minutes of that Maryland game where this is Indiana is playing and the students are getting into it. They're chanting, "We want Bama." The atmosphere has just changed around this program exponentially. And I really want to see that translated into attendance that stays all 4 quarters. And I think getting bowl eligibility this early on is going to be a huge part of that.
Yeah, he's starting to change culture when he starts to win games. Like I've said numerous times, you have a renewable resource in the students, and you just hooked whatever 10,000, 15,000 students in that student section because that was a fun game that they'll hopefully come back from Northwestern. Sean, tell us where we can find your podcast.
Yeah, so we're on YouTube right now. In probably within the next week, we'll be finalizing a deal with a platform called Believe Podcasts. You see Rhett Lewis on a ton of his stuff. So we'll be on the same RSS feed as, I want to say it's called Hoosier Tailgate. So we'll be moving kind of there on Apple and Spotify.
Awesome. Well, thank you, too, for your time. Thank you, Ricky. Enjoy the game. Enjoy Saturday. And hopefully we could get you on maybe during one of these 2 IU bye weeks and maybe in some bowl prep stuff.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
And thank you both for having us on.
All right, thank you. That does it for tonight's podcast previewing the Indiana Northwestern game. Also touching on some of this NIL transfer portal craziness that's going on in college football right now. You could read all our stuff at HoosierHuddle.com. Follow us on X at Hoosier_Huddle. And we'll be up at Northwestern again. Kickoff 3:30 up at Martin Stadium on the lakeside in Evanston. You can watch the game on Big Ten Network and listen to it on the IU Radio Network.